One of the biggest implementation challenges our program had was conducting diagnostic assessments. Our first hurdle was finding a space that was separate from the regular classroom space where we could administer diagnostic assessments. We ended up moving office spaces and classroom spaces around so that we had a dedicated assessment room that gave us a private space for diagnostic testing. We also had to consider who was going to do the diagnostic assessments and how we would provide that person the time they needed for getting the initial assessments done. As part of that process, we actually ended up having a mini training for all of our program staff, where we explained what diagnostic assessment is, outlined the process for conducting the assessments, and underscored the need for uninterrupted one-on-one assessment time with each prospective STAR student. We decided that it was important to have the classroom teachers conduct the diagnostic assessments so they would get the clearest possible picture of the student's strengths and needs. Moving to a managed enrollment schedule helped provide blocks of time that could be used for assessment. Next, we had to figure out the best way to organize our assessment materials so we could easily and quickly access all the word lists and readings that we needed to conduct our assessments. Once we had all of those issues resolved, we needed to talk to our students about diagnostic assessment. We wanted the students to understand why we were doing additional assessments, what those assessments would be like, and how the results would help us develop a plan to improve their reading abilities. Our team worked together to come up with talking points, and we spent time with each student to make sure everyone felt comfortable with the process. Finally, we all had to overcome our anxiety about conducting the actual assessments. The most important thing we learned is that it was okay if we didn't get every single thing perfect. The results still gave us a better picture of students' reading needs than standardized assessments did, and we could identify starting levels for instruction in each reading component. In the end, the effort we put into planning for diagnostic assessment was well worth it. The students and the teachers absolutely loved diagnostic assessment. The students liked having one-on-one time with the teacher, and they appreciated knowing what their reading strengths were, in addition to better understanding their needs. The teachers felt like they learned more about their students' goals as well as their reading needs. Diagnostic assessment has been one of the most rewarding parts of implementing evidence-based reading instruction in our program.
The biggest challenge our program faced in implementing evidence-based reading instruction was managing enrollment. Before the STAR project, we had an open lab where new students could enter any day, and students didn't have regular schedules. They could just drop in any times we were open. When we learned that evidence-based reading instruction meant that the teacher was going to conduct diagnostic assessment, group students with similar instructional needs, set up an instructional routine to fit in all the groups, and teach using explicit instruction, we quickly saw that open enrollment wouldn't work. We realized that the steps of explicit instruction, explaining, modeling, guided practice, and application, would take place over time, and new students wouldn't be able to enter in the middle or else they would miss important steps. The teacher was actually going to be teaching, not just helping students get started and answering questions as students worked on their own in the open lab. We also realized that if new students were continually added, the teacher would have to stop and assess them and fit them into the groups or form new groups and adjust the routine to the point that it wouldn't really even be a routine. So we set up a STAR class that met specific days and times for the intermediate level readers, and we instituted a managed enrollment policy for the STAR class. This was a very difficult change for both our students and our teachers. We honestly weren't sure it would work. We were afraid we would lose students if they had to attend at certain times or wait for a session to begin. What actually happened was that we did lose some students, but we realized they were the students who dropped out of the open lab anyway. Once they got adjusted, the students and the teachers loved the stability of the managed class that allowed them to move forward without the disruption of new students constantly entering. They loved the fact that the teacher was actually able to teach and that they could build on each day's lesson moving forward instead of reviewing to catch up new students. In fact, Soon after forming the STAR class with managed enrollment, our ESOL teachers asked if they could have managed enrollment. They saw the advantage of working with the same group of students over a period of time. Then the students who were left in the open lab asked for classes with managed enrollment. They also wanted the opportunity to have explicit instruction instead of working on their own. Now most of our classes use managed enrollment. This involved developing new processes and policies and changes to the curriculum. We tweaked our plan several times. Honestly, it was the most difficult change our program ever made, but without managed enrollment, we wouldn't have been able to implement evidence-based reading instruction. And although we started it just for STAR, managed enrollment has also made a huge positive impact on the entire program.
So one challenge is my room size that I have encountered when trying to deal with small groups. My room isn't very big, so it can be tricky sometimes, especially if the class is full. Like at the beginning of the semester when every single seat is full, it's really difficult to do small group work. So sometimes in the past we've moved some students to other parts of the building, which is also a challenge because our building is full in the morning. So trying to find space to work with in groups can be challenging. So unfortunately, when students' attendance lowers, the one benefit is it does make the room more accessible to do those sort of things. Noise is another challenge. It can be distracting. I think today they seem to work pretty well in their separate groups. I think it helped they were sort of at a different pace and on different things, so they weren't overlapping too much with what they were working on. And getting up and moving around obviously can be challenging sometimes, of just moving around the space, and our desks are kind of big and large, but I think the students take it with a grain of salt. Well, as a part-time teacher, a lot of planning happens outside of class. Most of the time when you're at school, you're pretty busy between the students and just other stuff going on. That's something that I really don't work on here because it's outside of the time I have, so it's easier just to do it at home where I have the time and the space. And sometimes I try to connect things a lot of times, so sometimes I end up creating quite a bit of material, which does take up time, but is also can be satisfying when you have things going the way you'd like them to be. But we do have some materials that we use today. We use some different level materials, and we used News for You yesterday to do some reading off of. So we definitely try to work with the things that we have, but it's definitely challenging thinking about all these different components, thinking about, do I have material for two groups of students? What if one group finishes early? So you really have to plan and be organized to be able to, I think, teach a class like this well, because otherwise students are going to sort of feel like if you're not very organized with it, how are we modeling that for students to be organized? The other thing that's a challenge is just needing some support for that. As I said, it can be tricky to try to do small group work when there's just one teacher, because you might not be able to help everybody who needs it. But I've been fortunate enough that I have some volunteers, and we have an AmeriCorps literacy advisor who helps out one day, so that I can utilize those folks to help us have those different group situations. So usually on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I have someone in class with me that helps me out, so that I can put people in different configurations and tailor things more than I would be able to do if it was, without that assistance.